You know, ever since the May election, when the New Democrats and the anti-oil and gas forces lost the BC election, I think environmental extremists have been kicking up their tactics a notch, getting more and more illegal. They had an illegal protest on the front lawn of the BC Premier. They broke into a pumping station in Burrard Inlet. Well, our friend Josh Skurnick has done a little investigating about the increasing lawlessness of environmental activists in BC. Here's a story he put together, and afterwards we'll talk to Josh directly.
BC's natural beauty and wealth, a source of pride and prejudice.
Good Lord, people. Oh, it's only an oil spill. Enbridge does it all the time. No big
I don't think there's a day goes by that my company, our project, our industry isn't somehow in the media.
As pipelines take the national spotlight to bring more Alberta crude to BC's coast and onto foreign markets, so does the opposition.
Do I think it's been growing? Absolutely. I don't necessarily think it's going to stop either.
And with the rule of law getting trumped by the rule of numbers and passion, why should they? Greenpeace protesters chained themselves to the gates of the Kinder Morgan pipeline terminal in Burnaby, BC. They painted anti-oil signs on the tanks. No arrests.
We did not push the RCMP to lay charges. That's their jurisdiction. They'll make those decisions.
Do you think it's in your interest to press charges?
We haven't made that determination.
I was home with my son making French toast on a Sunday.
Just more than a week ago, protesters set up a model fracking rig right on BC Premier Christy Clark's doorstep. The activists lasted 15 minutes before getting kicked off by Vancouver police. VPD would not comment on camera, but said in a statement the protesters were well behaved. No arrests, no charges. My understanding is that at one point they were asked to stay on public property. They were very cooperative, finished their protest, and caused no problems.
I don't think it's great for a 12-year-old to think that they have to navigate a group of 30 angry people on the front lawn in order to get out of the house on a Sunday.
What Christy Clark experienced the other day was the project being brought to her backyard.
You have to look hard to find an environmental protest in BC where an arrest is made. In 2010, Greenpeace made a fake oil spill in front of Enbridge's Vancouver office and chained themselves to the front door. 4 people were arrested, but organizers say that's because they left police with no option.
Do protesters have it pretty good in British Columbia?
Certainly, there's been some developments in terms of constitutional law that permit protests to be effective.
BC courts have made it clear the importance of free speech next to the rule of law. It goes back to a 2010 BC Supreme Court of Appeals decision. Falun Gong practitioners were protesting outside of the Vancouver Chinese consulate. A meditation hut stood on the public street. The city said the structure broke city bylaw. The court agreed, but decided that didn't mean it would go.
That was a very startling decision, and I think it's part of what the protesters are using.
Though the protesters were building right on Clark's property, case law suggests that any privacy or trespassing laws could be overridden by the right to free speech. The argument would be that the protesters' message that the government is fracking the backyards of British Columbians would be less effective if they didn't do it right here. And this BC protest protection could extend to all of Canada.
The law applies to the Canadian Charter, and it's going to have national application in my view.
So it's just good to be a protester in Canada then?
And so it's excellent.
Well, that's the news from BC. Josh Skurnick joins us now. Hey, Josh, welcome to the show. I am slightly terrified by the idea you put forward that simply because the environmentalists think they're very, very, very important, that they can go right onto the private property front lawn of BC's Premier to shout at the Premier and her 12-year-old boy. That's not the case law right now, is it? That's just something these protesters hope will happen?
Well, it's a really interesting situation that we have right now, and it goes back to that Falun Gong case that lawyer, that media lawyer was talking about, because in his mind, just as I said in that stand-up, if the protesters hadn't been on Clark's lawn, then their message in his mind wouldn't have been as fruitful or as powerful. And so with just the power that the BC courts have put on the right to free speech, he says that even though the Falun Gong practitioners were on public land, a public street, even with that, it could still create a precedent case law that could extend to being on private property like Clark's front lawn, Ezra.
Well, I hope that lawyer never gets appointed as a judge, because I think he's a crackpot. I mean, I suppose theoretically the most powerful presentation of the Greenpeace message would be to break into Christy Clark's home at night, flick the light switches on and off, and shout anti-oil company. That would be very powerful. I think we have to draw the line. By the way, I've seen that Falun Gong protest. It's on the sidewalk. You sort of got to walk by it, but it is not in anyone's private property. You showed clips of Greenpeace breaking into Enbridge offices, breaking onto property. I think there's an enormous difference between the freedom of speech to say what you want versus the power to invade someone's own property. Do you think we're going to lose that balance? Do you think it's already being lost in places like that Kinder Morgan pipeline pumping station?
Well, here's the thing, Ezra. So we talked about that case in 2010 when Enbridge, when the protesters went to Enbridge's Vancouver office and they chained themselves to the front door. Now, they got arrested because, according to the protesters and the media lawyers, that they were actually really impeding the workday for the Enbridge workers there. They couldn't get into their offices. And so because of that, they said that they were there for the long haul. They weren't going to leave until their message was done. That was from the protesters. They said that the police had to arrest them. Now, the Burnaby situation, they left of their own accord after Harper's throne speech, because that's what they wanted to do, is make a message on the day of Harper's throne speech. Well, because of that, they said that since they weren't really interrupting the day of work of the workers at the Burnaby Kinder Morgan plant, well, in that case, that's why they didn't get arrested. But the fact of the matter is, as you saw those pictures, they did paint a huge anti-oil sign on the tank, which is, could be evidence for vandalism. And of course, they were trespassing too.
Trespassing, vandalism, mischief, and for God's sakes, it's flammable oil. Who knows what safety issues arise? I think that this isn't so much a story of a new law as a story of new law breaking and police not wanting to evict environmentalists. Josh, I'm going to disagree with that lawyer Sutherland. I think the law of trespass is as old and as strong as the law of free speech, and even older. And I think what we're seeing here are police choosing sides. But I appreciate your report. Look forward to talking to you next week, my friend.
No problem. Look forward to it.
Right on.